The wind cut my face as I walked out barefoot, tasting salt and blood at the corner of my mouth. The porch light flickered like a broken heartbeat. No more tears, just a plan. 10 years of trust traded for one punch. Tonight, it was my turn to hit back from the shadows, with lawyers, data, and an account freeze that would leave my son stunned, staring at his banking screen. My name is Miriam Calder. I am 62 years old. For 35 of those years, I was an accountant, the kind of woman who finds comfort in the clean lines of a balanced ledger. I live in Ruston Falls, Colorado, in the same house my husband and I bought 3 decades ago. He's gone now. Retirement suits me. Mostly. I keep my mind sharp by teaching a part-time forensic accounting seminar at the Everpine Business Institute. Or at least, I used to. My son, Dylan, is 33. He's an architect at Northline Atelier, brilliant with angles and light. His wife, Ariana, is 30. She's an influencer, whatever that means, specializing in showcasing a life neither of them could afford. A life I was apparently bankrolling. The night it ended, the house smelled of rosemary and slow-roasted beef. Dylan was supposed to be coming over. We were celebrating his promotion. He called at 6 p.m., his voice strained. "Mum, stuck at the site. Rain check." I was disappointed, but I understood. I put the roast in the fridge, but something felt wrong. A nagging itch, an accountant's instinct. I opened my banking app. The postponed celebration was happening right then, at the Copper Lantern, the most expensive steakhouse in town. A pending charge. $412? I drove there. I sat in my car across the street, the engine off. I watched them through the rain-slicked window. Dylan, Ariana, and 4 of their laughing friends, raising glasses. They looked happy. They were using my card. I drove home. I waited. I didn't turn on the main lights. I sat in the dark kitchen, the roast cold behind me. They came in just after midnight, loud and smelling of wine. "Mom, God, you scared me," Dylan said, fumbling for the switch. The light flooded the room, revealing me at the table. I had the statements printed out, not just from tonight, from the last 6 months. $38,900. Dylan. My voice was flat. It didn't even sound like mine. Ariana scoffed, tossing her designer bag onto my counter. "Oh, Miriam, please. It's just money. We're celebrating the future." "My future?" I asked. "Or yours? This is my retirement. This is the money from your father." "Don't," Dylan warned, his face flushing. "She's just bitter," Ariana whispered to him, loud enough for me to hear. "She has all this, and she hoards it." "I'm not hoarding," I said, standing up. "I'm surviving. This," I tapped the statement. "This is theft." Ariana stepped toward me. "You've always hated me. You just wanted to keep him as your little boy." "Ariana, stop," Dylan said, but he moved toward me too, cornering me against the sink. "Tell me about this charge," I demanded, holding up the paper. $38,900. Where did it go?" "He needed it," Ariana shrieked. "For the partnership, you wouldn't understand." "I understand a balance sheet. Dylan, you've been lying to me." "Shut up," he breathed. His eyes were wild. "She's trying to ruin us." "Dill," Ariana yelled. I said, "Shut up." He swung. I think he meant to shove me, or maybe he meant to hit the counter. But his hand, the hand I taught to hold a pencil, moved fast. The heel of his palm caught my cheekbone. The force sent me sideways. My head cracked against the cabinetry. I slid down. The ceramic tile cold against my back. My sandal strap snapped. My phone clattered from my hand, skittering under the table. The silence that followed was absolute. I looked up. Dylan was staring at his hand. Ariana was frozen, her mouth a perfect O of surprise. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I slowly got to my feet. I grabbed my phone from the floor. I looked at my son, the man standing where my son used to be. I walked to the front door, my broken sandal slipping. I kicked it off. I kicked the other one off. I stepped onto the porch, barefoot, into the freezing Colorado wind. I heard the click of the deadbolt behind me, through the glass. I saw Ariana's lips move. The old woman is overreacting. My feet were numb by the time I reached the next house. Jonah Pike's light was still on. Jonah is 58, a widower. He used to be a forensic auditor for the state. He understands numbers, and he understands monsters. He opened the door before I knocked. He just looked at my face, then at my bare feet on his frozen welcome mat. Miriam, get inside. Now. He didn't ask questions. He got a washcloth, peroxide, and a bag of frozen peas for my cheek. He made tea I couldn't drink. My phone, I whispered. My hands were shaking too hard. The screen is cracked. He took it. What do you need? Everything. Dylan has the passwords. Jonah nodded. He disappeared into his office and came back with a laptop and a tangle of cables. I'll run a full data extraction, just in case. He worked quietly while I sat there, shivering. While Jonah backed up my life, I used his phone. My first call was to the bank. Miriam Calder, I need to report unauthorized activity and a stolen primary card. I gave them the number. I locked it. I locked the joint savings account. I locked the HELOC. While I was on hold, Jonah handed me my phone. It's all copied. Thank you. I spent the next hour on that phone. I activated two-factor authentication on everything. I changed every password, my email, my retirement portfolio, my utilities, my social media. I used a random generator, 17 characters, symbols, numbers, chaos. By the time I hung up, it was almost 3 a.m., back in my own house, in the quiet. Dylan's phone, the one I paid for, began to vibrate on his nightstand. A text. A second text. An email. Your transaction has been declined. Alert, your debit card has been locked due to suspected fraud. Alert, your login attempt from an unrecognized device was blocked. He was trying to move money. He was trying to get in. His phone lit up again. A call from his bank. But he wouldn't be talking to a helpful teller. He was talking to the fraud department. His accounts were frozen. In the sterile quiet of Jonah's spare room, the adrenaline finally receded, leaving a deep, throbbing cold in my cheekbone. The first mistake wasn't the punch. The first mistake was mine, made years ago. When my husband David died, the silence in the house was overwhelming. Dylan was untethered, and I, in my fog of grief, reached for an anchor. I'll add you to the savings, I told him one grey afternoon. Just as a co-signer, for emergencies. That was the crack. The first hairline fracture in the foundation. I had defined an emergency as a heart attack or a house fire. Dylan, and by extension, Ariana defined it as a desire. Jonah brought his laptop into the kitchen. his face set in grim lines. "We need to see what we're dealing with. Miriam." We logged into my accounts, the ones I had just frozen, the ones I could still view. It wasn't just the $38,900 hole. That was the gunshot wound. What I saw now was the exsanguination, death by 1,000 cuts, $800 at the Serenity Spa. I've never had a professional massage in my life. $4,200 for a set of matching designer luggage, a 2-night trip to Napa, first-class airfare. And then I saw it. A recurring charge. $10,000. $15,000. Another $5,000. All paid to a single entity, Vale Media LLC. "Jonah," I whispered, my mouth dry. "I've never heard of Vale Media LLC." He typed the name into a search database. My stomach tightened. I didn't need him to tell me. I already knew. Vale. Ariana's last name. The memory surfaced, sharp and sickening. My eye surgery. 3 months ago. I was legally blind for 48 hours. My eyes bandaged, sitting in my own living room. Ariana had been suffocatingly helpful. "I'll handle the paperwork. Miriam, you just rest." She had brought a stack of forms. "This is just for the insurance," she'd chirped. "And this one, it's a temporary power of attorney, just so I can pay the hospital billing for you. Dylan's snowed under at Northline. It's easier this way." I trusted her. I signed where her fingernail pointed. I thought about the other times, the hurried moments at the door. "Mum, just sign this quick. The courier is waiting." "Mum, this is just for the insurance renewal." "Mum, this is just a release for the bank." I had enabled this. My grief, my loneliness, my desire to be useful to my son, they had weaponized it. They had turned my trust into a withdrawal slip. "Miriam." Jonah's voice was low. He was no longer my neighbor. He was the investigator. "This isn't sloppy. This is methodical. This is financial abuse. We need to treat it exactly as such." He swiveled his laptop. "My front camera caught them leaving your porch." He clicked play. I watched myself walk out, barefoot and shaking. I watched the door close. I watched Ariana lock it. She paused, looking at her reflection in the dark glass of my front window, smoothing her hair. The audio was sharp in the night air. "He's such a baby," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "God, I can't wait until the 2-legged ATM finally kicks it so we can sell this dump." The 2-legged ATM. The ice in my veins solidified. The woman who had cried at my husband's funeral, the woman I had welcomed into my home, saw me as a machine to be emptied. I picked up Jonah's phone. "Who?" I asked, my voice devoid of tremor. "Is the most predatory financial lawyer you know." He didn't hesitate. "Tessa Monroe." I called her at 6:15 in the morning. I didn't care. A voice, sharp and awake, answered on the second ring. "Monroe. My name is Miriam Calder. My son and daughter-in-law have been systematically stealing from me. Last night, my son assaulted me." There was a pause. Not of sympathy, of calculation. "I'm at my neighbor's house," I continued. "My neighbor is a former forensic auditor. We've discovered a shell LLC and abuse of a POA signed under duress. Tessa Monroe, 40 years old, specialist in family financial malfeasance," I said, reading the bio Jonah had pulled up. "Are you interested?" "I'm interested," she said. "I need the last 12 months of bank statements. All of them. Checking, savings, Credit. Investment. I want photographs of any bills or receipts you have. I want your call logs from the night of the assault. I want a copy of that POA. Have it all scanned and in my inbox by noon. She was all business. I liked her immediately. What about the police? I asked. Not yet, Tessa said. A police report is a hammer. Right now. We need a scalpel. They don't know what you know. Let them operate in the dark. Gather the evidence. I hung up. I looked at the bruise blooming on my cheek in Jonah's bathroom mirror. It was ugly, purple and yellow. Dylan used his fists. He learned that from somewhere. But I was an accountant. I wouldn't use violence. My revenge would be found in the numbers, in the law, in the absolute, undeniable truth. I would take back everything, not just the money. I would take back my name. The day after the assault was not for grief. It was for strategy. My cheek was a mess of purple and yellow, a painful reminder of my naivety. I spent the morning on a secure video call with Tessa Monroe. She was all sharp angles and sharper directives. The power of attorney is the head of the snake, she said, her voice clipping. The one you signed during your eye surgery. It is dangerously broad. We are revoking it. Effective immediately. By 10 a.m., the revocation notice was notarized and filed. By noon, we were structuring a new, ironclad, irrevocable living trust. My house, my portfolio, my pension. Every cent it all went in. The castle gates were closing. The beneficiary? Tessa asked, her pen hovering. My alma mater, I said. The Everpine Institute, a scholarship fund for women in accounting. Good. She nodded. Not family. We've turned off the main faucet. Next, I filed extended fraud alerts with all 3 credit bureaus Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. I used the precise language Tessa fed me. I am the victim of suspected financial elder abuse and identity theft perpetrated by a family member with access. A full security freeze locked my credit. No one could apply for a card, a loan, or even a cell phone in my name. I then called my bank's fraud department, not the customer service number, but the internal investigations unit. I explained the situation to a senior investigator. I want geographic blocks enabled, I told him. Block all transactions originating outside of Colorado, and I want real-time alerts for any attempted purchase over $50. While I was building the walls, Jonah was drawing the map. He sat at his dining table, my cracked phone tethered to his laptop. He built a spreadsheet that was, in its own way, terrifyingly beautiful. He was an auditor again. He cross-referenced every statement, credit cards, checking, Zelle, Venmo. He traced the digital breadcrumbs. Here's the pattern, he said, pointing to the screen. Small purchases at first, groceries, gas, to test the water. Then, the spas, the trip to Napa, and here, he highlighted a series of ACH transfers, the Black Hole, Vale Media LLC. It's a domestic LLC, Jonah said, his fingers flying across the keys. Registered 6 months ago. Where? Wyoming, the go-to state for anonymity. Can you find the administrator? He smiled, a thin, cold smile. They paid for the privacy service to hide their names, but they got sloppy. The filing fee. He highlighted the transaction. Paid with your supplementary credit card. He pulled up another screen. And the administrator, listed on a secondary state tax filing they forgot to protect Ariana Vale. They were arrogant. They thought I was stupid. They'll be desperate by now, I said. the throb in my cheek sharpening. The shock of the frozen accounts would be wearing off, replaced by raw panic. Dylan's salary, I knew, didn't even cover their car payments, let alone their apartment. They'll come back, Tessa confirmed on our afternoon call. They'll apologize. They will try to get back in. We need to be ready. You want me to let them? I want you to document them, she corrected. We have established a pattern of past behavior. Now we need to establish present intent. Let them walk right into it. The plan was simple. It was devious. First, I opened a new, minor credit card account with a low limit, $5,000. I linked it to my new, secured email, setting up push notifications for every single transaction, especially declines. This was the bait. I would give it to Dylan when he came begging, a gesture of reconciliation. Second, I logged into my old online banking app, the one Dylan and Ariana knew. I left one old checking account active, but I had transferred every penny out. I left exactly $1 in it. It was a digital ghost, a shadow. I wanted to see if they would keep trying to log in, to see if their greed would make them rattle a locked, empty room. Dylan has called, I told Jonah, looking at the string of missed calls. He's left 3 voicemails. He's sobbing. He's sorry. He's scared. He wants to talk. Good, Jonah said. Invite them for dinner. I stared at him. Here, after what he did. Here, he said firmly. Saturday night, an apology dinner. You are hurt, but willing to listen. But you won't be alone. He made a call. Mrs. Petroff, my neighbour from 2 doors down, a retired ER nurse, and Mr. Henderson, our local pastor. 2 unimpeachable, neutral witnesses, Jonah said. They're just coming over to bring you soup and check on your fall, and they just happen to stay. The final piece was the recording. Colorado is a one-party consent state, Tessa explained. You are aware of the recording, so it's legal, but we'll be even better. We'll be overt. Jonah installed a new, high-definition security camera in my kitchen, angled perfectly at the table. It was small, but visible if you looked for it. And right by the front door, he placed a small, polite, professionally printed sign on the wall. This property is under 24/7 audio and video surveillance for security purposes. They'll be so focused on the money, Jonah said, adjusting the angle. They won't even read the sign. My last call of the day was back to the bank investigator. I forwarded him Jonah's spreadsheet and the Wyoming LLC filing. I'd like to formally report a pattern of suspected wire fraud and elder exploitation involving my accounts, I said, my voice pure business. The entity is Vale Media LLC. I have reason to believe it's a shell corporation. I am meeting with the perpetrators on Saturday, and I expect them to attempt to regain access to my funds. The man was silent for a moment. Mrs. Calder, he said, his tone shifting from bureaucratic to engaged. Thank you for this documentation. We will be monitoring this activity. We will be ready. The trap was set. The bait was in the water. All I had to do was wait for the sharks to circle. The doorbell rang at 7 p.m. Exactly. I took a steadying breath, the air smelling of the tomato bisque I had simmering. I checked my reflection in the hall mirror. The heavy-duty concealer, applied with an artist's precision, muted the angry purple on my cheekbone to a dull, sickly yellow. It looked like I'd walked into a door. Plausible. I opened it. Ariana swept in first, all perfume and apologies. holding a bottle of wine that cost more than my weekly groceries. Dylan lingered behind her on the mat, his eyes fixed on my floorboards. Miriam. Oh, your face. Ariana rushed forward, her cold fingers brushing my arm. Dylan told me you took a nasty fall. You really must be more careful, wandering around in the dark. I will be, I said, stepping back. Thank you for the wine. The soup is hot. She glided into my living room, her eyes doing a rapid inventory. Is that your tomato bisque? Nobody makes it like you? Her gaze drifted, sharp and assessing, over the furniture, the silver frames, landing on the small safe box I kept in the study. We were just talking about this house. Such strong bones. You still have the original deed? Right. We should really look into getting it appraised. For the trust. Dylan finally shuffled in, closing the door. Mum, I'm so sorry. About the other night. I don't know what happened. I just saw red. It'll never happen again. It was a speech. Rehearsed. Hollow. He was sorry he got locked out. I'm glad you came, Dylan. We moved to the dining room just as the doorbell rang again. Mrs. Petrov, my neighbour from 2 doors down, and Pastor Henderson. Oh, Miriam, dear, we heard you took a tumble. Mrs. Petrov bustled in, carrying a covered dish. We brought the scalloped potatoes you like. Ariana's smile tightened by a millimeter. She hadn't expected an audience. How lovely. Ariana recovered, turning her charm on the pastor. We were just discussing Miriam's finances. We're trying to help her manage her assets. You know, combine everything for tax efficiency. It's all just so complicated for seniors these days. I set the ladle down. Before we eat, I said, my voice clear and carrying in the quiet room. I have one rule. We will not be discussing the specifics of the other night. This is a dinner of reconciliation, not recrimination. Ariana gave a small, humorless laugh into her napkin. Of course, Miriam. Whatever you say. We ate. The conversation was strained. After a few minutes, I turned to Dylan. Dylan? I said, interrupting Ariana's monologue about a gala. I know things have been difficult. The accounts are frozen. It was a security measure. The bank insisted. I reached into my apron pocket and pulled out the new credit card. The bait. I opened this for you. It's linked to a new account. It's for emergencies, gas, groceries. The limit is low. $5,000. Just until we get everything sorted out. His relief was palpable. He took the card, his hand closing over it. Mum, thank you. See. Ariana, I told you. She understands. And, I said, turning to Ariana, you mentioned the house, the assets. I had my lawyer draft some preliminary documents. I slid a thick, official-looking blue folder across the table. It's about transferring the property, a gift, for my son. Her eyes, which had been bored, snapped wide. She practically snatched the folder, her nails clicking on the cover. I'd like you both to sign, I said gently. Just a preliminary signature, to show intent. So my lawyer can proceed on Monday. It was, of course, nothing. Just stacks of blank copy paper, watermarked. I wanted their signatures. I wanted to document, in front of witnesses, their eagerness to take my home just days after my son had drawn blood in my kitchen. Ariana slipped her phone onto her lap, beneath the table. We talked about the weather. Pastor Henderson talked about the new roof for the church. My phone, resting in my apron, vibrated silently. I didn't need to look. I knew what it was. Alert transaction declined. Merchant Aspen Elite handbags. Amount $28,000. They were trying to buy a $28,000 handbag on a $5,000 emergency card, less than 10 minutes after I gave it to them, under my own roof. Ariana's smile had vanished. A moment later, my phone buzzed again. A text message. From her. Mom, I think the new card is broken. The bank must have made a mistake. It's not working. I looked at her, my face a mask of mild concern. I texted back under the table. Oh dear. How frustrating. I'll call them on Monday. Let's just enjoy the soup. The doorbell rang a third time. It was Jonah. Miriam, he said, holding up a warm pie. I apologize for interrupting. I baked an apple crisp, and I couldn't let it cool alone. Jonah, your timing is perfect, I said, ushering him in. You know my son, Dylan, and his wife, Ariana. Jonah nodded, his eyes missing nothing. He was no longer the quiet widower. He was the auditor. His gaze settled on Dylan, then moved to my concealed bruise, then to the legal-looking folder in front of Ariana. The predators in the room had just met a wolf. The dinner ended quickly after that. The tension was suffocating. I walked them to the door. Dylan, I said. One last thing. I held out my hand. My spare key. The one to this house. His face, which had been pale and apologetic, darkened. Mum, it's my key. I've always had a key. And now I am asking for it back, I said, my hand steady. Ariana scoffed from the porch steps. After everything, you'd lock your own son out. That's cold. Miriam? Even for you. Please, Dylan? The key. His jaw worked. He was angry. He dug into his pocket, his shoulders bunched, and slammed the key into my palm. Are we done? He spat. Yes, I said. We are. I closed the door. I turned the deadbolt. My house was finally secure. My phone was vibrating again in my pocket. And again. I pulled it out as Jonah, Mrs. Petrov, and the pastor watched. Alert transaction declined. 1,000 kyals. Alert transaction declined. 500 kyals. Alert transaction declined. 100 kyals. Alert transaction declined. 49.99. They were in their car, parked just down the street, frantically trying lower and lower amounts. They were trying to drain it to the last cent. 6 attempts in 2 hours. I looked at Jonah. I think, I said, Tessa has everything she needs. I looked down at the phone buzzing in my apron. 6 declined transactions. I pulled it out, my hands perfectly steady, and placed it on the dining room table next to the cooling soup. I looked at Mrs. Petrov, at Pastor Henderson, and then at Jonah. Well, I said into the silence, it appears emergencies are very expensive tonight. Ariana, who had been staring at her own phone with growing fury, looked up. That card is defective. You probably messed it up. No, I said. I walked to the sideboard where Jonah had set his laptop. It's working exactly as intended. It's designed to stop fraud. I turned the laptop to face them. Jonah's spreadsheet was open. The room, which had been filled with the scent of bisque, now smelled like a courtroom. We're done with the performance? Ariana, let's talk about the numbers. Dylan shifted, confused. Mom, what is this? This, I said, tapping the screen, is an accounting. $312,000. That is the amount you have taken from me in the last 8 months. The pastor inhaled sharply. Dylan just shook his head, looking pale. Taken. No. Mom. That's not. That's investment. We were managing things for you. Were you... I pointed to a recurring line item. $130,000, transferred directly to an entity called Veil Media LLC. You coded it as a donation in my checkbook register. Did you think I wouldn't see it? Ariana finally stood up, knocking her chair back. The mask of the concerned daughter-in-law was gone, replaced by something hard and cold. It is an investment. It's my company. It's a family brand. It's my job. Miriam. You wouldn't understand the media world. It takes capital. I understand contracts. Ariana, I said. Where is the note for this loan? Where is the shareholder agreement? Where is the business plan you presented to your sole investor? Me. We're family. She spat. We don't need contracts. That's where you're mistaken, Jonah said, his voice cutting through the tension. He'd been quiet until now. He stood and picked up a remote for the television over the fireplace. The screen flickered to life. It was a flowchart. Veil Media LLC? Jonah began, his voice the detached monotone of an auditor. Is a shell corporation registered in Wyoming, funded 100% by Miriam's accounts. And these... He clicked, and a new list appeared. Are the expenditures from the LLC's bank account. A lease on a Porsche. Rent on your downtown apartment. $17,000 to designer boutiques. You haven't just been stealing. Ariana, you've been laundering. You're piercing the corporate veil. The IRS finds that fascinating. Ariana's face, for the first time, showed a flicker of fear. She was in a room she didn't understand, playing a game she didn't know the rules to. The television screen changed again. A video call was connecting. Tessa Monroe's face filled the screen, sharp and unsmiling. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Calder, Tessa said. I am Miriam's legal counsel. I'm joining you to explain what happens next. We have established clear financial malfeasance and abuse of a power of attorney, which my client was coerced into signing while medically incapacitated. That is a felony. We have established a pattern of wire fraud via your shell corporation. Also a felony. We are currently holding a file that is ready to be transferred to the district attorney's office tomorrow morning. Dylan looked wildly between me, the screen, and his wife. He was panicking. Mom, no. This is a mistake, Ariana. Tell them it's a misunderstanding. Ariana's fear evaporated, replaced by pure venom. She turned on me. You old, controlling bitch. You never wanted him to be happy. You just wanted to keep him on your leash, dangling your money. No, Ariana, I said. I just wanted him to be a man, not your pet. You talk a lot about family, I continued, picking up my phone. Let's listen to how you talk about me when you think I'm not around. I pressed play. The audio from Jonah's ring cam filled the stunned silence. God, I can't wait until the two-legged ATM finally kicks it so we can sell this dump. Mrs. Petrov gasped. Pastor Henderson closed his eyes. Dylan looked as if I had struck him. He stared at his wife. You said that, he whispered. She's lying. It's fake. It's edited. Ariana shrieked. Shut up. Dylan roared. He took a step toward me, his hands clenched, his face purple with rage. You set her up. You did this. He stopped. He was close enough for me to smell the wine on his breath, but he didn't touch me. The witnesses, the camera on the wall, the lawyer on the screen. He stopped himself, but it didn't matter. I held up my other hand. My phone was already to my ear, the call connecting. "Yes, operator," I said, my voice perfectly level. "I need to file a police report. My name is Miriam Calder. I was assaulted in my home last Wednesday night by my son, Dylan Calder." Dylan froze. The colour drained from his face. "What? No, Mum. Don't. We were arguing. It was an accident. It was a crime. Dylan." Ariana finally understood. This wasn't a family squabble over money. This was a prosecution. "You can't," she whispered. "That's a record. That's his job." "My lawyer will be in touch with your lawyer," I said, my voice flat. The police arrived in less than 10 minutes. Mrs. Petroff and Pastor Henderson provided witness statements about my state when I arrived at their doors. The officers photographed the bruise on my cheek, which I had wiped clean of concealer the moment my guests arrived. The report was filed. An official, permanent record of domestic violence. Ariana grabbed her purse. "You will regret this," she hissed, her voice trembling. "My lawyer will destroy you." "Get out of my house," I said. They left. Jonah locked the door behind them. "Tessa's office will have the petition for a temporary restraining order ready to file by 9 a.m. tomorrow," I said to him, my hands finally beginning to shake, just in case he forgets himself again. The police report was the key. The following morning, the bank investigator I had spoken to was no longer just monitoring, he was acting. The courtesy holds became permanent freezes. The joint savings account, the one I had opened with my late husband, the one I had foolishly added Dylan to for emergencies, I ordered it closed. The balance was transferred to the new, hardened trust. Next, I called my pension administrator. "I am changing my direct deposit instructions," I said. My voice was metallic, unfamiliar. I gave them the routing numbers for the trust. My income stream was now diverted, flowing into a reservoir they could not find, let alone tap. Then, I made the call to Northline Atelier. I did not ask for Dylan. I asked for human resources. "My name is Miriam Calder. I am calling to revoke a personnel authorization." The HR manager was confused. "Ma'am, what authorization?" "Years ago, I signed a form allowing my son, Dylan Calder, to assist in managing my investment portfolio, which is linked to my late husband's retirement package from your parent company. I am formally revoking that authorization, effective immediately. All future correspondence is to come only to me." There was a stunned silence. I had just, in professional, corporate language, informed my son's employer that he was not to be trusted. While I handled the calls, Tessa Monroe handled the assets. The first notice was a repossession order for the Audi SUV. It was leased in my name. It was a luxury I paid for. A tow truck was dispatched. They would be without a car by sundown. The second notice was sent via courier to the property management of their high-rise apartment. Their home. The lease I had co-signed. The one that made me financially responsible. I was terminating my involvement. It was a formal, legal notice to quit. They had 30 days to vacate or assume the lease themselves, a lease they could not possibly afford without my money. I spent the rest of the afternoon cleansing my digital life. Every supplementary credit card was cancelled. Every shared password was changed. Every two-factor authentication was rerouted to my new, secured phone number. I was erasing them, cell by cell, from my financial body. The panic on their end must have been immediate. Jonah, who was still monitoring the fraud alerts, called me that afternoon. "Ariana is trying to go off-grid," he said. "She just attempted to open an account on a major cryptocurrency exchange." "Did it work?" "No. The moment she submitted her driver's license for the Know Your Customer verification, the extended fraud alert flagged her. The system blocked the application for suspected financial exploitation. She's locked out." She was radioactive. The banks knew. Now the exchanges knew. The final move came from Tessa. She filed the civil suit, simultaneously. She sent a formal notice of prospective garnishment to Northline Atelier's payroll department. Dylan's next paycheck, his own money, was now in legal jeopardy. That evening, I sat in my quiet kitchen with Tessa. The table was covered in documents. "We are demanding the full amount," she said, her pen tapping a final number. "The $312,000 they took, plus statutory interest, plus my legal fees, plus the costs for your security system and the forensic audit. The complaint is filed." The house was still. The siege was over. I had cut every line. My phone, the one they no longer had the number to, lit up on the counter. A text from a new, unknown number. It could only be one person. The message wasn't angry. It wasn't full of excuses. It was just 5 words. "Mum, talk. I'm really scared." I agreed to the meeting. Not in my home. Not in theirs. We met at Tessa Monroe's office, in a conference room that smelled of industrial carpet cleaner and paper. The air was thick and dead. A court stenographer sat in the corner, her fingers poised. A high-definition video camera was mounted in the ceiling corner. Jonah sat beside me, not as a neighbor, but as my auditor and witness. Dylan and Ariana sat opposite us. They looked shipwrecked. Dylan's eyes were red-rimmed and puffy. Ariana was vibrating with a silent, cellular rage. They had clearly been fighting. The Audi was gone. The eviction notice was served, and their bank accounts were empty. Reality had arrived. "Let's begin," Tessa said, her voice cutting through the silence. "The purpose of this mediation is to discuss the civil complaint filed by my client. Miriam, please, for the record, describe the events of last Wednesday." I looked directly at my son. "You came to my home after I discovered you and Ariana had stolen $38,900 from my retirement account. When I confronted you with the evidence, you became enraged. You swung. You struck my left cheekbone. Here?" I reached up and, with a makeup wipe Tessa had provided, I scrubbed the thick concealer from my face. The bruise was no longer purple. It was a mottled, hideous blend of green and yellow. It was the color of decay. Dylan flinched as if I had hit him. He looked at the bruise, and something inside him finally, irrevocably, broke. He put his head in his hands, and he wept. Not the crocodile tears from my dining room. This was the hiccuping, gasping sob of a child. I didn't mean," he choked out. "The pressure. It's the cards. The other cards." Ariana's head snapped toward him. "Dylan, shut up." "I can't," he yelled, his voice cracking. "It's not just her money. Mom, it's mine. I have $42,000 in credit card debt you don't know about. I was trying to keep up. The cars, the dinners, the image. She wanted the image. I was trying to buy the partnership at Northline. I was trying to—" "You are pathetic," Ariana hissed, her voice low and sharp. A weak man, always needing his mother to bail him out. You can't even stand up for your own wife. She wasn't looking at him with love, or even pity. It was pure, unadulterated contempt. She had just revealed her entire worldview. Tessa let the ugly silence hang for a moment, letting Ariana's words poison the air. Then, she clasped her hands on the table. Thank you for that clarification, Mrs. Calder. It's helpful. Now, here are the 2 paths forward. She gestured to a thick file on her left. Path 1. We proceed with the full civil lawsuit for $312,000, plus damages, interest, and fees. My office will also forward our complete file, the POA fraud, the Shell Corporation, the police report to the district attorney for criminal review. This will likely result in felony charges for you both. It will be public. It will be permanent. She then slid a single sheet of paper to the center of the table. Path 2. A settlement. A strict, non-negotiable confession of judgment. It contains no confidentiality clause, but it keeps the criminal charges suspended, contingent on absolute compliance. Dylan was staring at the paper as if it were a life raft. I have one rule, I said. My first words since describing the assault. It is my only principle in this. I will not give $1 more. Not for your debt, not for your rent, not for your lawyers. There is no more money. There is only repayment and therapy. For him? Dylan nodded frantically. Yes. Okay. Yes. I have the truck. He was talking to me, pleading. The Ford F-150, it's in my name. And my camera collection. The Leicas, they're worth a lot. I can sell them. I can make a down payment. I'll get it all back. Mum, I promise. Ariana stood up so fast her chair screeched. Are you insane? You are not selling my truck. I will not be humiliated. She pulled out her phone and stalked to the window, turning her back to us. Mark, it's me, she said, her voice suddenly powerful and angry. They're trying to railroad us. Her lawyer is a joke. I want you to file the countersuit immediately. Defamation, harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress. We'll take everything she has left. It was a good performance, but she was an amateur playing against professionals. My phone buzzed. A text from Jonah. Call is a spoof. VoIP number, untraceable. She's talking to no one. I looked at Tessa. She gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. She had gotten the same message. Ariana snapped her phone shut and turned, a smug, triumphant look on her face. You'll be hearing from my partner. You've made a very serious mistake. Miriam? I looked at her, truly looked at her. For the last time. The designer clothes, the perfect hair, the cold, empty core. You're right about one thing. Ariana, I said, my voice quiet. You didn't hit me. You never laid a hand on me. She smiled. But you taught my son how to, I said. You showed him how to see me as a thing, not a person. You taught him how to devalue me, dollar by dollar, until all that was left to take was my dignity. You didn't throw the punch. You just loaded the gun. The color drained from her face. The weak man was staring at her, his eyes finally open. The meeting at Tessa's office was the ultimatum. The signing was the execution. Tessa arranged it not at her office, but back at my house. On Saturday. The scene of the crime. They need to understand this isn't an abstract legal proceeding, Tessa had said. This is a home they violated. We will finalize this on your territory, not theirs. When Dylan and Ariana arrived, the dining room was no longer set for a cozy meal. It was a boardroom. Tessa sat at the head of the table. I sat to her right. To her left sat Jonah, Mrs. Petroff, and Pastor Henderson. 3 witnesses to the signing. And in the corner, near the kitchen, sat a quiet man in a nondescript suit. The internal bank investigator, Mr. Davies, who had flown in from the regional office. Tessa did not speak. She simply began to lay out the evidence, one exhibit at a time, in the center of the table. Exhibit are the bank statements, with the $312,000 in thefts highlighted. Exhibit B, the Wyoming LLC registration for Vail Media. Exhibit C, the audio transcript from the ring cam. Exhibit D, the log of the 6 declined transactions on the bait card. Ariana. Seeing the blue folder, the one from the apology dinner, still sitting on the sideboard, made a desperate lunge. This is what matters. The asset transfer, you gave it to us. She grabbed it and tore it open, expecting to find a signed deed. She stood there, flipping through the pages. Blank, blank, blank. Every single page was watermarked with a large, grey copy. There is no asset transfer, Ariana, I said quietly. There never was. But you said. I said we'd discuss it. Now, let's discuss this. I picked up my own phone and read from a text message Jonah had extracted from my cracked phone's data. A text from Ariana to her friend, sent 2 months ago, with a picture of a new necklace. It's a Cartier, I read, emphasizing her misspelling. The ATM doesn't even know it's missing. She thinks it's a donation to my business. God, she's so old. Dylan closed his eyes. Tessa slid the final document across the table. It was the confession of judgment. You have one choice. Dylan? She said. I watched my son. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely pick up the pen. $312,000 in restitution to your mother, Tessa dictated, as if reading his sentence. Plus $18,000 for her medical, legal, and forensic auditing fees. An initial payment of $40,000 is due in 21 days, derived from the sale of your truck and camera equipment. The remainder is to be paid at a rate of $4,500 a month for 5 years. You will enter mandatory anger management and financial therapy. You will sever all financial ties with Ariana Vail. Any breach, any missed payment, any attempt at contact in violation of these terms. And this document becomes a judgment. And the full criminal file goes to the district attorney. Do you understand? Don't you dare. Dylan. Ariana hissed, her voice low and desperate. If you sign that, you lose me. You lose everything. Dylan looked at her. He looked at the man from the bank. He looked at the witnesses. Finally, he looked at me. There were no tears left. I've already lost everything, he whispered. He uncapped the pen and signed his name. Ariana let out a sound, a strangled gasp of fury. Thank you, Mr. Calder, Tessa said. She notarized the signature with a heavy, final stamp. As Dylan put the pen down, Jonah stood up. He walked over to the bank investigator, Mr. Davies, and handed him a small, black USB drive. That's the complete file, Mr. Davies, Jonah said. The internal logs, the LLC data, and the evidence of the shell company's expenditures. It's all there. Mr. Davies nodded, pocketing the drive. Thank you for your cooperation, Mrs. Calder, We will act on this immediately. He stepped into the hall to make a call. Ariana, scrambling to grab her purse, froze. Her phone, on the table, made a single, sharp bing, an email notification. She stared at it. Alert your account, ending in 8812. Vale Media LLC has been permanently closed due to suspicious activity and violations of our terms of service. A hold has been placed on all remaining funds pending further investigation. The signing was not an end. It was a transfer of burdens. Dylan moved out of the downtown apartment they could no longer afford and into a room at the cross-country motel, the kind of place with peeling paint and a buzzing neon sign that charged by the week. I knew this because his therapist, a condition of the settlement, was required to send a confirmation of attendance to Tessa's office. He had started the 24-week anger management and cognitive behavior program. I, too, sought counsel. Not for anger, but for a grief I hadn't known how to name. I found a support group, held in a church basement, for parents of adult children who had become abusive. I sat on a metal folding chair, drinking watery coffee, and listened. I heard stories of stolen checks, of pawned jewelry, of shouted threats, of shoves. I heard the same question, over and over. Where did I go wrong? I listened, and for the first time, I felt the knot of guilt in my own stomach begin to loosen. It wasn't my fault. I hadn't caused this. I had only, finally, survived it. Ariana, predictably, took her fight to the only venue she had left the internet. She posted a long, tearful video about a cruel, millionaire mother who had turned on her loving son. She painted herself as the victim of a vindictive, controlling matriarch. The video was live for exactly 45 minutes. Tessa sent her and the platform a cease and desist letter, citing the confession of judgment and the police report. The video vanished. Dylan's professional life also fractured. Northline Atelier. Upon receiving the notice of garnishment and, I suspect, hearing whispers of the police report, placed him on indefinite administrative leave. It was a quiet firing, but his old boss, perhaps seeing a flicker of the man Dylan used to be, forwarded him a small freelance drafting project from a contractor. It wasn't a career. It was a lifeline. The silence in my own house was, at first, deafening. I needed to fill it, not with noise, but with purpose. I called Pastor Henderson. I'd like to use my old skills, I told him. I started a weekly workshop in the church's community room, financial literacy for seniors. I taught women my own age how to read a bank statement, how to spot a scam, how to set up two-factor authentication, and how to create an irrevocable trust. I was teaching them how to build the walls I had learned to build too late. Jonah and I fell into an easy routine. He'd come over, and we'd cook. He made his wife's brisket. I made my husband's carbonara. We talked about the quiet, empty spaces in our homes. We shared stories of our late spouses, of the sudden, sharp loneliness of widowerhood. It was a quiet warmth, a companionship built on shared loss and a mutual understanding of balance sheets. It was steady. It was enough. The 21-day deadline for the first payment approached. I didn't let myself wonder if he'd make it. The settlement was the settlement. The numbers were the numbers. On the 20th day, a cashier's check for exactly $40,000 was delivered to Tessa's office. I learned later that Dylan had sold his truck for less than it was worth. He had sold every lens, every camera body, every piece of his prized collection. He had made the payment. He had held up his end of the bargain. Ariana, meanwhile, had been hunting Jonah, who had a morbid curiosity for her digital footprint, found her new profile. She was portraying herself as a Phoenix-based media consultant. He found a public post from a wealthy Scottsdale businessman, a man she had been seen with. "A word of warning to my friends," the post read. "Always run a background check. Even on the pretty ones. You'd be surprised what pops up. Like a recently dissolved LLC in Wyoming, flagged by banks for fraud." The local Ruston Falls business blotter had, it turned in, picked up the story of Vale Media's forced closure. The internet, the tool she had used as a weapon, had a long memory. That night, I went to bed. I did not double-check the locks. I did not sit in the dark kitchen. I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, the first in almost a year. But when I woke, the first sound I heard was the quiet, reassuring beep of my security system, which I had left armed. As always, Ariana, predictably, made one final, desperate attempt. She filed a frivolous lawsuit, claiming I had made a verbal promise to gift her and Dylan the house and half of my portfolio. She demanded an emergency division of assets. Tessa's response, filed within an hour, was a masterpiece of legal contempt. The plaintiff provides no evidence, no documentation, and no witnesses to this alleged promise. The claim is baseless, filed only to harass a victim of assault and financial fraud. The court agreed. At the preliminary hearing, the judge dismissed her claim and issued a temporary order protecting all my assets. Furthermore, the judge granted our motion Vale Media LLC was to be dissolved, and its books opened for a full forensic audit. That order was the final nail. Faced with the legal requirement to show where every stolen dollar had gone, Ariana panicked. She made one last mistake. She called a friend, a former tech acquaintance, and the conversation was recorded. We heard her, frantic, asking if the friend knew how to crack a credit card limit, specifically referencing the $5,000 bait card I had given her. She wanted to find a way to bypass the bank alerts. Tessa filed the recording as supplemental evidence of ongoing criminal intent. The night before the final hearing, Dylan came to my house. He stood on the porch, in the dark, under the same porch light. He looked thin, and he was alone. I spoke to him through the locked screen door. "Mum," he said, his voice rough. He wasn't crying. "I'm not here for money. The second restitution payment. It will be on time. I'm drafting freelance. I have to ask, is there ever a way back? Not to the money, not to the house, just back." I looked at him, this man who was my son, this stranger who had cost me so much. "This is the way back." "Dylan?" I said, my voice not unkind, but firm. "It is not a single conversation. It is the work. It is the check that arrives on time, every month. It is completing the 24 weeks of therapy. It is staying separate from her influence. It is never, ever asking me for a single favor again. The way back is the long, hard road of restitution. That is all there is." He nodded, not meeting my eyes. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay. Mum?" He turned and walked away. The final hearing was a formality. Faced with the leaked phone call and the audit, Ariana's lawyer had no choice but to accept our terms. The ruling was read. Ariana Vale would dismiss all claims against me and my estate, and she would accept a civil penalty for the fraudulent use of her LLC. Dylan's confession of judgment and his restitution plan were ratified by the court. The criminal charges against both of them would remain suspended, contingent on absolute compliance. If they missed a single payment, a single therapy session, the district attorney would be notified. We stood in the cold, bright hallway of the courthouse. It was over. I watched Dylan pull out his phone. His face went pale. He turned the screen to me, his hand shaking. It was an email from the bank's internal fraud department. Mr. Calder, pursuant to the court order. Please be advised that all secondary accounts linked to your Social Security number, including custodial accounts previously associated with Miriam Calder, have been placed on a 90-day administrative freeze to ensure the preservation of assets for the execution of the judgment. They were freezing old accounts, childhood accounts that held maybe a few $100s. It was the bank's final move, a checkmate. It was the system telling him, you own nothing that is not forfeit. We are watching everything. He didn't get angry. He didn't protest. He just bowed his head and put the phone back in his pocket. He accepted it. I stepped out of the courthouse doors into the cold, high-altitude wind. Dylan and Ariana went left, already arguing. Jonah was waiting for me by the car, holding the door. I sat on the stone bench for a moment and took off the formal heels I had worn. I slid my feet into a new pair of soft, leather flats he had brought for me. I wiggled my toes. I'm not barefoot anymore, I whispered to myself. I stood up straight, my posture tall. I turned my back to the courthouse, leaving my son and his wreckage behind. In my handbag was the court order, a document of my freedom. In my future was a life that belonged only to me. The punch from that night was just a scar, a reminder to stay vigilant. But the account freeze, the one I made in the dark, barefoot and bleeding, that was the final sound. It was the bell tolling the end of an era. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Where in the world are you listening from? Let me know in the comments so we can connect and share our thoughts. Please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story be heard by more people.